Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to another day of Amonkhet previews. We got a number of cards to look at today, and as you can see from the screen here, we have Bontu the Glorified, the last of the gods that needed to be revealed, and we're going to talk more about that in just a second. Quickly before we get started though, if you check out the description below, you'll find two ways to help support the channel, one of which is our Patreon page. We're actually really close to our next goal, so if you have a chance, check that out. Second way is through our Amazon affiliate store, and if you buy anything through any of the Amazon sellers via those links, a small percentage will come back to help support the channel. Goes a really long way. Thank you to everyone who's engaged in either of those programs or both. Now, having said that, let's get into the cards, starting with Bontu. Bontu the Glorified, a black and 2 legendary creature god, mythic, 4/6, menace indestructible. This, of course, can't attack or block unless a creature died under your control this turn, but you can pay a black and 1, sacrifice another creature, scry 1, and each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. I feel a similar way about this card as I did the red god. I feel like both are really good in a certain deck and maybe not so good in a lot of other decks. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, because I think the decks that those two cards are good in are decks that potentially could be standard playable decks. The red god, of course, being an aggressive red card for just an aggro or maybe aggro/burn, whether that's mono red or perhaps a Rakdos deck. This one is going to be great in like an Esper zombie aristocrat style deck, and that's really where the zombie direction seems to be going, and we're going to see another card later today that also supports that archetype. And I think between this card and that card, as well as a lot of the things we've already seen, that potentially could be a deck that crosses over into standard and maybe at some point could be a tier 1 deck. I think the pieces are that strong. So having said that, yes, this will see standard play if that's the case. If that deck can get there, this will be a huge part of it. The downside to this card is if that deck doesn't get there, there's not a whole lot of other places to play it, and it might just kind of sit around and not do a whole lot. Now, aside from standard though, it's still a very good card for you in limited. Even though you might not always be able to turn it on consistently, as long as you have at least maybe some creature generation or token generation where you feel like you could turn it on at least a few times in the course of a game and it will be effective for you, that might be good enough in a game of limited. Also, having a sack outlet, especially in limited, is a big plus in a lot of games. And the scry effect and the drain life is not inconsequential either. I think this card, regardless of what happens to its lifespan in standard, is going to be an awesome commander card though. Any deck that wants to run an aristocrat style strategy, this would actually fit in really well there. Protection of Heckma is our next card. It's a white and 4 enchantment. This is an uncommon. If a source an opponent controls would deal damage to you, prevent 1 of that damage. Alright, the downside first for me here is the fact that this costs 5 and it does absolutely nothing on its own when it enters the battlefield. Now, you can think of a couple scenarios, of course, where this card is probably going to be good for you. For example, if you're up against a bunch of 1/1 tokens and you're just being swarmed, yeah, this is a great card to protect you from a situation like that. Or Copycat, for example, it kind of shuts down that combo, which is sort of nice by taking away the 1 power that's coming at you from all of the Felidar Guardians. So it does have some sort of role, but you got to ask yourself, is that the best way to protect yourself against that combo? Probably not. I think there's more efficient ways to do that, either through control methods or what have you. So a 5 casting cost card like this, I don't even see it necessarily making sideboard play in standard, unfortunately. I just don't really see this as being a really strong card, quite honestly, due to its casting cost and its effect. I think it's fine and limited to board in under certain circumstances, especially if your opponent is being super aggro with a lot of small creatures and you lose game 1 really quickly, then maybe you throw it in just to have it as a backup plan in case your deck starts to stall out early on again. But other than that, I don't see it doing too much. Next, we have a card that comes to us from a Japanese language spoiler, and loosely translated, it's Glyph Keeper, 2 blue and 3. It's a Sphinx with flying, 5/3, and whenever this becomes a target of a spell or ability for the first time each turn, counter that spell or ability, and it has an embalm cost of 2 blue and 5. Now, this really feels like a solid blue control finisher to me. And it's not perfect. I mean, here's its weakness. This card doesn't want to see like 2/3/3 flyers on the battlefield because that kind of messes it up pretty badly. But if you're playing control and you can hopefully remove those creatures or prevent them from entering the battlefield to begin with, then this card I think could be really awesome. Now, a quick word of warning, much like the difference between Shroud and Hexproof, if you try to do something to this card yourself, the first attempt will still be countered. So if you're trying to, say, bounce it or put an enchantment on it or something like that, that ability or spell will be canceled, and then your opponent will get a shot at taking the card down. So be careful about that. That's just something to think about. But ultimately, this is a pretty durable card. It's not great in combat situations, but if you can prevent one-on-one combat situations between 3/3 flyers, then it's going to be really good, because the other ways to get rid of this are not very effective. Lightning Bolt is going to take 2 bolts, and then eventually you're going to be able to cast it again with the Embalm ability and bring the token in, and then it's going to take another 2 bolts to take care of that. So it's going to take a place up, basically, of Lightning Bolts in a situation like that. It's going to become very frustrating very quick for your opponent. Really good card. I do think this can see some standard play, just due to the fact that I do feel Control is going to be very good in a upcoming meta, and this could definitely see play there. Next we have By Force, a red and X sorcery, uncommon, destroy X target artifacts. Well, Mardu Vehicles, we barely knew you. So there you go. Obviously, this is the hate card to make sure that Amonkhet cards can flourish in the next environment, right? This is going to shut down a whole lot of the strategies that came out of Kaladesh. No doubt, this is going to be a card that sees play in standard and out of sideboards, especially early on, to prevent any sort of surprises when it comes to matchups with Mardu Vehicles or something like that. Not too much more to say about it. I mean, it's actually very, very efficient artifact removal, and maybe even could cross over into some other formats in sideboards just because of the efficiency behind the spell. But I really think it's going to shine most in taking the standard meta and completely converting it over to the world of Amonkhet, or perhaps even allowing some stuff from Battle for Zendikar and Shadows over Innistrad to come back due to a little bit of a weakening to the mechanics of Kaladesh. So I guess we'll see with that one. As far as limited goes, it's a sideboard card there too. There's not a whole lot of amazing artifacts we've seen previewed so far, but if your opponent's running something problematic, you can always sideboard this in. Harsh Mentor. This card's really intriguing to me. It's a red and 1 human cleric 2/2. Whenever an opponent activates an ability of an artifact, creature, or land on the battlefield, if it isn't a mana ability, this will deal 2 damage to that player. Now, face value-wise, when I first looked at this card, I kind of said, well, it's a bear with upside. The upside is a Punisher mechanic, which I don't love those because it does put the power in your opponent's hand. For example, you can paint them into a corner a lot of times, but they are making the decision whether to take the damage and use the effect, or just not use the effect and not take the damage. So you're giving them an element of control over this card and over the ability. Now, think about maybe having 2 of these on the battlefield, maybe even 3 of these on the battlefield. All of a sudden, it starts to work really well in multiples. And I was trying to think, well, where does this make the most sense? I don't know if it's standard, because I think standard is going to be more about aggressive, kind of beat down, maybe some burn. I feel like red is just going to be all in on just using the 2-drop spot to just apply immediate pressure on your opponent. But maybe modern. I started thinking, like, what if you had this combined with, like, Eidolon, for example, and your opponent's trying to play fetch lands, and each fetch land is not only pinging them for 1, but taking 2 damage from this. If you happen to get 2 of these out on the board, cracking a fetch land will become super painful. That could get really interesting. So maybe like Naya Burn or something like that. I could see this showing up in modern potentially, maybe even more so than standard. Although I think it has potential for standard too. As far as limited goes, it's a good 2-drop. I mean, it might not be as great in that format as some more constructed varieties like Modern, for example, but at the same time, if nothing else, a 2-drop is also going to maybe slow down your opponent a little bit or make them rethink their game plan. I think is definitely worth the 2 mana, so I think it's just fine for you there. Finally, this could maybe show up in some defensive Pillow Fort style commander decks too, which would be actually kind of fun to play, I think. Sweltering Suns. This comes to us from a German language spoiler, 2 red and 1. It's a sorcery. It deals 3 damage to each creature, but it has cycling 3. So it's similar to Anger of the Gods in some ways. It doesn't exile the creatures though, which that would have been nice, of course, but instead you get cycling. So if you're ahead and you just want to keep putting the pressure on, then you just cycle this away and hopefully get something that can put the pressure on. This is awesome. I mean, this will definitely see standard play. Again, red is just getting so many great tools. Red feels super pushed in this set. So here's another one. It will be there. Even if it's out of the sideboard, this card is going to be awesome. Limited, yeah, play it. It's a panic button. If you fall behind, you might need it. And if you don't fall behind, you can always cycle it for something else. Fantastic there as well. Now, these two cards are both gold cards. They're both uncommon, and they were previewed in the same article today on Wizard's site. First one is Enigma Drake. It's a red, a blue, and 1. Drake, star 4, flying. This will have power equal to the number of instants and sorceries in your graveyard. First off, it reminds me a lot of Spellheart Chimera, but I actually like this better. It doesn't have trample, but I rather have the 4 toughness as opposed to the 3 toughness, quite honestly. I think that's actually pretty awesome. Now, I'm not really sure where it fits. I was thinking maybe in Modern in the Is It Like Spells Matters deck. I feel like Spellheart Chimera is not there because of its 3 toughness. A card similar with 4 toughness, is it good enough? I'd at least want to test it out if nothing else. In Limited, I still think there's value to be had here. Even if you don't have a lot of instants and sorceries in your deck, you play it as a 0/4 to protect yourself at 3 mana, especially if you have a more controlling, methodical deck. And then as the game goes on, perhaps it becomes a 1/4 or 2/4. I feel like you got your value out of it for 3 mana there. Secondly, we have Wayward Servant, a black and white zombie, 2/2. Whenever another zombie enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses 1 life, and you gain 1 life. Now, of course, this is the card I was alluding to earlier. Imagine playing this in multiples in an aristocrat-style zombie deck. That could get kind of crazy, right? So this is another card that I do think has potential to get across into the format in Standard, as long as that deck can hang in the meta. As far as Limited goes, now it is 2 different colors, so that means sometimes it's going to be a 3-drop more so than a 2-drop, but that's just fine. If you have some zombies in your deck to back this up, you're going to find a lot of value here for 2 mana. Again, another card that crosses over nicely into casual formats and even some commander decks that are playing zombie tribal. Alright, next we have Samut, Voice of Dissent. A green, a red, a 3, legendary creature, human warrior. This one's a mythic, 3/4 with flash, double strike, vigilance, haste. Other creatures you control have haste. Pay a white and tap, untap another target creature. There's a lot happening here. First off, I'm going to say this. Does this feel like maybe someone who could potentially be a planeswalker soon to anyone else? I mean, this card represents a hero from the story being Voice of Dissent, right? And perhaps this individual finds their spark. Who knows? Maybe a replacement for a Gatewatch member that could be dying in this set. I feel like maybe Gideon. Some people think Nissa too. Either or might not make it. So I guess we'll see what happens with that. But just something lore-wise to think about. The card itself is amazing. I mean, first off, it has flash. So this is an awesome combat trick. 3/4 double striker flashing in. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. But what this card really wants to do is turn sideways, or maybe not turn sideways because it has vigilance, but it wants to attack. Double strike, vigilance, haste on a 3/4. Awesome. Oh, and by the way, gives all your other creatures haste too. Oh, and you know what? Do you like Exert? Well, guess what? This can help enable Exert and bypass the drawback a little bit by untapping other creatures. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about this. The power level is definitely there for Standard. I'm not exactly sure which deck it falls into. Maybe you just put it in the mono red deck and splash a little green, or maybe it's just a core Rakdos deck that splashes a little green for this, and it's a nice curve topper that is going to help put the game away. There's a lot of raw power here. It's definitely going to see play in Standard, potentially even Modern at some point, just because I think the power level is high enough. 5 mana starts to feel a little sketchy in Modern, but if you have a little bit of ramp or something behind it, I'd at least want to test it out, if nothing else. If Limited goes, it's a mythic, you won't see it all the time, but if you're lucky enough to open it, you're going to be having a good day. This card is awesome. The only drawback to it really is that it's legendary, so you can't put 2 or 3 of these down and rumble with them. Think about this perhaps even in Commander as well. I mean, if this was your Commander, playing it a couple times over the course of a game, the 3/4 double strike, commander damage getting across, that could be a big deal there too. Having said that, those are the cards for today. Things are starting to wind down a little bit now. Tomorrow there'll be more previews, so we'll have another video tomorrow where we talk about everything that happens within the next 24 hours. Now, Thursday, late afternoon, Mark Rosewater is going to do a stream and talk about the set a little bit. I assume there'll be more cards revealed, but also Friday morning, they're going to reveal the whole set. So we'll begin our full set review then. I want to do something a little different this time and maybe talk about cards in groups and try to move the set review along a little bit faster than past ones. So I'll figure it out. I'll try something a little bit new and see how it goes, and we can always go back. But Until next time, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe. Have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.